Hello everyone, hope you're having the most awesome day today. Welcome to the Film Insight channel. For today's video, we're going to discuss some of the most successful rescues featured on 24 Hours to Hell and Back. So, sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's get right into the content, guys. Bella Giana's. Starting with the very first episode of 24 Hours to Hell and Back, Gordon Ramsay headed over to Congers, New York to rescue a failing restaurant called Bella Giana's. It would be an understatement to call this restaurant a mess, since it not only had terrible food but was run by a family with tons of issues. For one, it was originally opened up by Frank Vasti with his wife Theodora, but after they split up, she remarried to someone named Frankie, who later became the business's co-owner. After a while, Frankie unfortunately passed away, so Theodora's son Vinny filled in his spot and became a co-owner. This is when the once successful business really went downhill, since Vinny would ruin the atmosphere with his borderline bipolar outbursts. At a moment's notice, he'd be screaming at the staff about how much he hates his job without any regard for the patrons, mind you, or cry about his tough position. Really, the only reason why the restaurant was still standing was due to Frank's financial support, but he was running dry on money. A lot of crazy stuff happened throughout this episode, but most notably, Ramsay and his cameraman were so disgusted by the smell of the restaurant's kitchen that they started to gag. Other than the restaurant's apparent filth, the famous chef made Vinny the focal point of this rescue, since he's the only one who truly damaged the business. In a surprising turn of events, he actually gets him to wake up and admit that things needed to change. Of course, Ramsay completely revamped the restaurant soon after, giving it a better menu, an improved dining room, and high-tech equipment. Following the rescue, the restaurant was met with something that they had long been unfamiliar with being success. Not only do customers actually love the restaurant and its food now, but it seems like they're quite packed on most nights. Impressively, Vinny changed his ways and became a lot calmer on the job, which made the place more welcoming. One reviewer on Yelp pointed out that Vinny cares a lot more about his patrons, going as far as to run to the store to get lemonade for a kid who wanted some when they were out. Hearing wonderful testimonials like this makes it a lot less surprising that they're ranked as the #1 Italian restaurant in Congers. La Serenata. 4 episodes later, Gordon Ramsay headed over to Los Angeles, California to give La Serenata a second chance. The owner, Aurora, who's 75 years old, runs the place with her son Marco Sr., who hired his son Marco Jr. as a chef. Their business originally opened up in 1984, but was so successful that they decided to branch out into 2 other locations. Things were running pretty smoothly for the first 2 decades, but things took a turn for the worse when Aurora's husband passed away from heart complications. Due to the overwhelming amount of work that comes with running a restaurant, the owner hired her son Marco Sr. to become the restaurant's manager. Unfortunately, this would turn out to be a grave mistake, since the two would constantly butt heads. While Marco Sr. was interested in bringing the restaurant back to the modern times, his mother had other plans in mind. She was extremely stubborn when it came to change and didn't want to let anything go, but you can't really blame the grieving woman. As a result of the frequent clashing, the workplace had become a toxic environment, which consequently made the patrons feel very uncomfortable. Obviously, due to the poor communication and teamwork, the restaurant barely made any money, which forced Aurora to shut down the other franchises. Barely able to keep the original business afloat, the owner decided to sell her house and live with her son and his family. Considering the fact that she was in such a tough spot, it's only natural that she sought help from a pro like Ramsay. It's an amazing feat that the famous chef was able to do anything about this dumpster fire of a restaurant, since there was so much wrong with it. From waiters sweating into food to produce rotting in the kitchen, Ramsay had to even mend the family's dysfunctional relationship. Thankfully, after having a meaningful conversation with Aurora, Marco, and his son, they were all on the same page. By the end of things, Marco Sr. seemed to genuinely want to step things up and promised to support his mother and the restaurant in any way that he could. Of course, the family's heartfelt reconciliation could have just been for the cameras, since Marco went back to his old ways and reverted most of Ramsay's efforts. As frustrating as this may be, the restaurant is still open and thriving to this day, which is baffling to us. Rocking 4 stars on Yelp across 500+ reviews, many seem to praise them for their vegetarian/vegan options. Regardless of the fact that they practically wasted Ramsay's time, it seems like they got something out of it, since they're still standing tall. Patrick Malloy's. Nearing the end of the first season, Gordon Ramsay headed over to Hermosa Beach, California to help Patrick Malloy's avoid permanent closure. Much like the previous entry, this restaurant was tangled up in a bunch of family drama, which made it very difficult for them to make money. Originally, the place was owned by Alice and her late husband, but his position was eventually given to their son Patrick. When Alice got remarried to a man named Fred, he would soon become the 3rd co-owner of the restaurant, which is when things really started to go downhill. If you really think about it, losing a parent has to be one of the most painful things one can experience, but it can be even more hurtful to see that person be replaced. Now take that experience and force the person who's grieving to work closely with the man who's replacing their father, and yeah, it's pretty awful. This more than unconventional partnership caused tons of tension in the restaurant and has done nothing but fuel the business's downfall. While Fred claims that Patrick is lazy and unmotivated, Patrick flat out denies this and expresses that his stepfather just doesn't respect him as an owner because he's young. Considering the fact that the owners couldn't agree on anything, the staff had no idea who to follow, so they began to misbehave. Being $135,000 in debt and months away from closing down, the owners desperately reached out to Ramsay for some guidance. Putting aside the fact that the restaurant's food was awful and that the kitchen was filth incarnate, that was truly the least of their problems. The biggest issue was that Patrick and Fred couldn't see eye to eye, so Ramsay spent most of his time trying to make this happen. By the end of the episode, he managed to convince the two to make a change and apologize to Alice for the tough position they put her in. Of course, the famous chef also deep cleaned the building, gave the dining room a makeover, and improved the menu. It's quite unexpected, but Fred and Patrick continued to keep things professional after Ramsay had left, which allowed for them to successfully revive their failing restaurant. Since the episode aired, they did make some changes to the decor since they felt Ramsay's design made the place look like a bar. Still open to this day, Patrick Malloy's has a decent 3.5 stars on Yelp with mixed reviews on the food and service. Even if the food is a hit or miss, customers seem to unanimously love the restaurant's happy hour. Boardwalk 11. Moving on to the second season, Gordon Ramsay headed over to Los Angeles, California to bring Boardwalk 11 back on its feet. Steven Spear, the owner of Boardwalk, opened up the restaurant/pub/karaoke bar to follow in his father's footsteps, who was a successful restaurant owner. Opening other restaurants in the area as well, Spear quickly learned that he was nothing like his father since almost all of his businesses failed. Considering the fact that Boardwalk 11 was the only restaurant he had left, the owner devolved into someone who was controlling to an annoying degree. Since he was terrified of failing yet again, Spear would get in the way of his staff's jobs and attempted to take on every task in the restaurant. As a result, nothing really gets done properly since there's only so much one person can do, so the food is very inconsistent. This is very disappointing to Kat, the head chef, who wants nothing more than to have control over her kitchen, but the owner gets in the way of that. Due to the lack of leadership, the staff not only come into work late, but are so careless that they'll come in drunk or hungover. Fearful that he would lose everything, the owner called out to Ramsay to turn things around, which was a tall order. Hyperbole or not, the famous chef declared that the restaurant's food was probably some of the worst that he's ever eaten. Additionally, Ramsay pointed out that he's never seen his staff so poorly behaved, which is why 2 people were fired by the end of the episode. After seeing how disgusting and flawed the restaurant was for himself, Spear admitted that the restaurant was on its last leg. Thanks to this, Kat was given full control over the kitchen, and another employee named Kat was promoted to general manager to take the load off of Spear, who was clearly stressed. Promising to stick to Ramsay's changes, the owner also claimed that he would step back and let the staff do their job, which is great. Obviously, he was lying since he reverted all of Ramsay's work and even rehired the 2 staff members that were fired. Changing the name to Boardwalk 11 Karaoke Bar and Grill, the business is still somehow open and rocks a solid 4 stars on Yelp. Who would have thought this man would succeed? Well, that'll be all for today's video here on the channel. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to drop a massive like down below and comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more content like this and turn on those sweet bell notifications for instant access to our content. Have a good one, guys.